This morning we have filed multiple charges against Mr. Thompson, including 2 counts of murder related to the death of John and Jennifer Longworth, 1 count of conspiracy to commit arson, and multiple counts of arson. We've provided you with the probable cause affidavit that was filed this morning. The affidavit speaks for itself, and so I will not go into any detail regarding the allegations there, other than to note that there is significant additional information regarding the weekends of October 27th, November 2nd, and November 9th, the weekend of the explosion. Prior to taking any questions, my only additional observation is this, and that is to recall back in December of 2012, when we filed the original charges in this matter, that we stated at that time that it was our obligation as a public safety community to do everything possible to make certain that justice was done on behalf of every single victim in the Richmond Hill explosion. And the developments of the last 2 weeks have been a significant step in achieving that goal. And going forward, we will obviously vigorously continue to complete the prosecution of the remaining cases, including the case filed today. Chief Hyde?
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. I think you said it best. I think the affidavit speaks for itself, but also that the tireless efforts of the prosecutor's office to make sure that justice is served. I want to thank Denise Robinson. I want to thank Prosecutor Curry and fine detectives who continue to work on this case to bring about justice. But we'll continue to track the criminal elements in our city, and the prosecutor's office has been a great partner in doing that. But this is one case that really stuck in our minds and our hearts for a long time, because we're talking about families. We're talking about our whole community was impacted by it. And yes, we will continue to bring people like this to justice. Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor.
Any questions?
Was Ms. Shirley helpful at all in bringing you to Mr. Thompson?
Well, again, I think the probable cause affidavit speaks for itself, but certainly is set forth in there. The charges today are based in part upon information provided by Monterey Shirley. Yes.
Why did it take this long to catch up with Mary Thompson?
Well, I think it's fair to say that prior to the plea agreement with Ms. Shirley, that there were a number of individuals who were potentially on the radar as having been involved, and it wasn't until obtaining information from her, again as set forth in the probable cause affidavit, that allowed the investigators, and I would add, I commend Detective Wager and the other investigators, our Deputy Prosecutor Denise Robinson and Mark Hollingsworth, in this matter. But obviously, as is clear from the probable cause affidavit, that pinpointing the information that led to these charges and originated with Ms. Shirley.
Mr. Curry, we heard a lot 2 years ago of this so-called fourth suspect in the white van that had been seen by some witnesses that have been included in the original probable cause as well. Do you believe that Mr. Thompson is that person?
Well, at this point, I will not characterize anything beyond what's set forth in the probable cause affidavit. It speaks for itself in terms of any given trial. There's going to be direct evidence, there's going to be inferences to be drawn from that evidence, but that is appropriate for the trial of this matter and not for a discussion today.
Is Terry Thompson the final suspect in all of this?
Well, as of today, certainly there are no other charges pending against anyone else. If the investigators learn of and continue to follow up on information that leads to other individuals, then we'll pursue that. As of today, that is not the case.
Can you speak to what the probable cause says as to Mr. Thompson's role in the thermostat portion of this?
That is alleged in there that he assisted in removing and replacing the thermostat, then in turn taking it back off again, according to the probable cause affidavit, Ms. Shirley, because she wanted the newer and original thermostat replaced, and that's set forth in there.
Comment on the strength of the case given the developments in the last 2 weeks?
No, my ethical prohibitions do not allow me to speak to whether a case is strong or weak or otherwise.
When did you originally start speaking with Mr. Thompson? Was it prior to Ms. Shirley's plea deal last week?
All I can referred to as what's in the probable cause affidavit, which clearly sets forth that Ms. Shirley was interviewed and gave certain information. Mr. Thompson was interviewed the weekend of MLK, actually on the day of MLK on that Monday, and gave certain statements. He did, I will state, as set forth in the probable cause affidavit, deny any involvement on the events of November 10th.
Was he kept in custody during that time, or he wasn't kept in custody until he was arrested yesterday?
He was in custody as of yesterday, that's correct.
Terry, what would you say to some of the people in Richmond Hill who have expressed frustration about the length of time this has taken and about the plea deal regarding Ms. Shirley?
Well, that's two separate issues. I will say that in any given case, we are equally frustrated sometimes at the length of time that's required, but that's just the nature of the criminal justice system, and that's something that we have to live with and deal with. We understand their frustration. To the extent that there was any concern regarding the plea agreement with Ms. Shirley, I will merely say that from our perspective, we had no concern whatsoever regarding it. We believed that was an appropriate resolution and a judgment that we felt was appropriate given all the circumstances.
Is this an open investigation, and are detectives actively investigating any additional possible suspects?
I'll not speak to that any further at this point. As I said before, given if there's information out there that requires follow-up, clearly our office and the detectives will do so. I don't think it's fair to characterize that there's any sort of additional target at this time.
Would it be fair to characterize him as a person that had been on the radar of investigators throughout this process over the last 2 years or so?
Again, I believe it's fair to say that there were a number of individuals were on the radar. Just like in any investigation, you would look at individuals who were associates of the original suspect, and that has been the case all along. But it was not until the information provided Ms. Shirley that obviously the focus became on Mr. Thompson.
You're seeking life without parole in the other two unresolved cases at this point. Will you seek the same for Mr. Thompson?
At this point, that would be premature. Again, we'll go through the same procedure we do in any of these other matters, but that will be down the road.
Terry, how would you characterize not only Ronson Shirley's cooperation, but would you say perhaps she has such a wealth of knowledge that it potentially could delay the start of Mark Leonard's trial and solve that?
Well, I think as we said at the time, that whatever the defense chooses to do, they will do. And whether they seek to continue that trial remains to be seen. We believe that there's certainly adequate time for the defense to follow up on any new information, but ultimately that's going to be out of our hands, and that's going to be up to the court in South Bend.
And how would you characterize the cooperation? Does she have a lot more to tell you?
I can't speak to anything beyond what's set forth in the probable cause.
His initial hearings tomorrow morning, then?
I am not certain, but we can confirm that.
Just for the people who are watching this live, can we just, according to probable cause, go back just a little bit? Thompson's relationship with the Leonards, his relationship with them, and what he is exactly accused of doing.
Summarize just a few of the things in the probable cause, and again, based upon his statement when he was interviewed by the investigators, was that he had done work for Mark Leonard for a number of years. He acknowledges that in October of 2012, that Mark Leonard offered him $5,000 to burn Miss Shirley's house, and that was given 6 cans of gasoline for purposes of doing so. Again, in the probable cause, it recites that there are then different versions of what occurred on the weekend of October 27th. Ms. Shirley's statement is that that they were told by Mr. Thompson that he was stopped by a police officer on the way and became scared and therefore did not go through with the plan to burn the house, and that in his statement he states that he gave that as an excuse, instead had no intention of doing that, and became scared as of that weekend. The following week, according to Ms. Shirley's statement, she observed Mr. Thompson and Mark Leonard stuffing cardboard up the fireplace to block the chimney, but again, on that second weekend, any attempt failed.
characterize his...
And again, it's fair to say, as in the probable cause, that in his statement to the investigators, Mr. Thompson denies any involvement in the explosion which occurred on November 10th.
Can you characterize as the probable cause his role and his importance in what eventually happened with the thermostat, from your understanding of how it caused the explosion?
Well, no, again, I can't speak to anything beyond what's the facts set forth in the probable cause. In terms of any inference to draw from that and arguments to be made, that's appropriate for trial and not for today.
You said that Mr. Thompson worked for Mark Leonard. Did Leonard have a business, or in what capacity did he?
I think, for example, he was doing some work related to a hotel that Mr. Leonard was doing some work at, as an example. Thank you for your questions. Thank you.
Questions? Yeah.